Her hand shot out first, sharp, impatient, unforgiving. Before he could even finish his sentence, the store manager grabbed the elderly man's arm and yanked him toward the door. His body jolted from the force, his eyes widening with shock as he tried to steady himself. The strap of his old messenger bag slipped on his shoulder while his shoes scraped helplessly against the floor. Behind them, soft laughter rose, the kind people pretend to hide but don't really try. Two employees whispered to each other as if the scene were some kind of entertainment, one of them pointing at the old man like he was a joke. He wasn't fighting back, he wasn't shouting, he just looked devastated, his breath trembling as his dignity was dragged with him. They kicked him out like he was nothing, like an inconvenience, like a burden, like someone whose presence didn't deserve a single ounce of respect. But the truth about who he really was, the identity he never revealed, was about to hit them harder than anything they could imagine. And when it finally came to light, nothing in that store, not the people, not the pride, not the laughter, would ever look the same again. Before we begin this emotional story, tell us in the comments from which city you are watching, and don't forget to leave your like to keep following us. He stumbled when the door opened behind him, the cold air rushing in as if the whole world were watching his humiliation. The manager's grip didn't loosen. She shoved his arm forward, and the elderly man's breath hitched, the kind that comes from shock rather than age. People outside glanced over, unsure whether to intervene or pretend they saw nothing. Most pretended. "Please, just let me explain," he whispered, voice thin, barely catching on the wind. She didn't even look at him. Her jaw tightened, and her eyes held that sharp, impatient glare reserved for people one assumes are trouble. Inside the store, the laughter continued, small, mocking chuckles from the two young employees who treated the moment like a heartwarming story gone wrong, except there was nothing heartwarming about it. The old man took a step back to steady himself. The messenger bag at his side, frayed, patched, faded, swung gently, as if reminding him of everything he still carried. He looked through the glass door at the shelves of expensive cameras and sleek laptops, items he once understood better than anyone in that store. But none of them knew that. They saw only a trembling stranger they thought didn't belong. As he turned to leave, something inside him cracked. Not anger, not pride, but a quiet grief. A hidden pain that had followed him for years, a secret from the past he never wanted to revisit. The kind of secret that, once uncovered, would become a life-changing story for everyone involved. The manager crossed her arms and watched him walk away with rigid certainty, completely unaware that what happened next would change her life forever. Behind her, one of the laughing employees shut the register, still smirking, still pointing. "People like that shouldn't even be allowed inside," he muttered, convinced he knew the world. Across the street, the old man stopped. He placed a hand on a bus stop sign, the cold metal pressing into his palm. He drew a long, uneven breath. The humiliation lingered in the air around him, but so did something else, a decision. One he had avoided for far too long. He looked back at the store and whispered a name no one had spoken in decades. A gust of cold wind brushed against him as a bus approached, its engine growling softly, headlights reflecting off the wet pavement. The old man didn't move. His fingers tightened around the metal pole, as though anchoring himself to the moment he had spent years avoiding. The driver opened the doors with a hiss and waited, expecting him to step inside. But he just shook his head gently, stepping back. He wasn't ready, not yet. Instead, he slowly unzipped his bag and pulled out a small leather notebook, edges worn, pages yellowed. A single photograph slid out, a younger version of himself standing in that very same store, arm around a man who looked proud, confident, and incredibly wealthy, his late brother. The man whose legacy he had run from, the man whose empire he had quietly helped build long before anyone knew his name. He traced the photo with trembling fingers. A second chance had been handed to him once, and he had walked away after the tragedy. Now life was handing him another one, in the most humiliating way possible. Back inside the store, the manager paced behind the counter. The laughter had died down, replaced by a curious tension. One of the employees, Lucas, tapped nervously on the glass. "He's still out there," he murmured. "Why isn't he leaving?" "I don't know," she replied, though her voice carried something new. Doubt. A subtle discomfort. She replayed the moment in her mind, the fear in his eyes, the quiet plea in his voice, the way he hadn't raised a hand or caused a scene. He had simply tried to speak, and she hadn't listened. The other employee, Chloe, rolled her eyes. "Come on, Sarah, don't tell me you're feeling bad now. He looked like some homeless father trying to steal something." Sarah didn't answer. The word homeless echoed in her mind, but something about it didn't fit. His clothes were old, yes, but clean. His manners gentle, his bag organized, cared for. And when he spoke, even in the middle of fear, his voice carried a dignity she couldn't ignore. She stared at the door again. Outside, the man tucked the photo back into the notebook and closed it gently. His decision, once terrifying, now felt inevitable. He took one slow step forward, then another. The bus pulled away, leaving him in the wash of its exhaust, walking back toward the place that had just torn him down. Inside, Sarah swallowed hard as the door handle began to turn. The bell above the door chimed, a soft, familiar sound, yet in that moment, it sliced through the room like a warning. Everyone looked up. Sarah froze mid-step. Lucas stopped typing. Chloe's smirk faded. The elderly man stepped back inside, his breath a little steadier now, his eyes no longer filled with fear, but with something deeper. Resolve. He approached the counter slowly, each step deliberate. The employees exchanged looks, unsure whether to call security or simply wait for instructions. Sarah's throat tightened as she forced herself to speak. "Sir, I already told you. You can't—" "I know," he interrupted gently, "but you deserve to hear the truth, and so do they." The room stilled. He reached into his bag again, pulling out the same notebook, but this time he opened it to a single page, an old company badge, the store's original logo, a signature at the bottom, Robert Hale. Lucas squinted. Wait, Hale? Like the Hale Electronics family? The rich family who— But the old man didn't let him finish. He turned the page, revealing documents, photographs, handwritten notes, blueprints, product sketches, early prototypes, the kind that only someone on the inside would have possessed. "I wasn't stealing anything," he said softly. "I built the first version of your company's camera system, 42 years ago, before your CEO was even born." Sarah's lips parted, but no sound came out. Chloe stuttered, But the founders were two brothers, right? One disappeared. They said he abandoned the company." His eyes lowered. "I didn't abandon it. I lost everything the day my brother died. And grief is a kind of exile. I walked away before I could ruin what we had built." The silence was heavy, thick with a truth they were never prepared for. He wasn't a thief. He wasn't homeless. He wasn't nothing. He was the man whose work had shaped the shelves around them, the cameras, the lenses, the technology they sold every day without knowing whose hands had first drawn their designs. Sarah felt her knees weaken. The image of her dragging him out, the jerks, the humiliation, burned through her chest like fire. "Sir, Mr. Hale, I didn't know," she whispered. He lifted his eyes to hers. "You didn't ask." A crack formed in her voice. I'm so sorry." He nodded once, not in forgiveness, not yet, but in acknowledgement. Something deeper was still coming. The air felt heavier as Robert closed his notebook and held it to his chest. Sarah stepped forward instinctively, guilt weighing on each movement. The two young employees lowered their heads, embarrassment washing over their proud expressions. Robert looked around the store, at the glossy screens and gleaming lenses, at the logo that had changed so many times since he last saw it under neon lights in a small garage. It wasn't the company he built, not fully, but it still carried a piece of him. "I didn't come here today to reclaim anything," he said quietly. "I only wanted to buy a replacement part for a camera I designed decades ago, a camera my brother and I built together." His voice broke slightly at the mention of his brother, the deep trauma still lodged inside him after all these years. A different kind of silence fell. Softer, almost reverent. For the first time, they saw him. Sarah swallowed hard. "Please, let me make this right. At least let me help you with what you need." Her voice trembled, not out of fear, but out of something unfamiliar. Humility. Robert hesitated. The old wound inside him pulsed. Forgiveness wasn't easy. Redemption never was. but he could see that her regret was real, and perhaps this moment, painful as it was, could still become a small act of kindness that neither of them expected. He finally nodded. "All right." Lucas exhaled with relief, stepping closer. "Mr. Hale, if you don't mind me asking, why didn't you ever tell anyone who you were?" Robert's gaze drifted toward the store lights, the way they shimmered like the ones from the workshop he once shared with his brother. "Because the world doesn't need to know your name to value your work," he answered softly. "And because sometimes disappearing feels easier than healing." Chloe blinked rapidly, her eyes glistening. "We treated you like you were nothing," she whispered. "And you're the reason this place even exists." He looked at her with tired kindness. "Everyone is worth something, even the ones we overlook." Sarah placed her hand lightly on the counter. "Mr. Hale, would you allow us to honor your name properly? The company deserves to know your story." He took a long, calm breath, feeling something inside him shift. A release, a forgiveness he hadn't expected to find today. "Maybe it's time," he said. And for the first time in years, the weight on his shoulders grew lighter. The moment Robert agreed, something shifted in the room, almost like the air warmed a little. Sarah gestured for him to follow her toward a quieter corner of the store, far from the counters where the humiliation had taken place. He walked slowly, not because of age, but because the past weighed heavily on each step. Sarah opened a small service desk, pulling out a sleek drawer of parts and older components. "Tell me what you were looking for," she said softly. He placed his camera on the counter, a model so old it looked almost out of place among the modern versions. But to him it wasn't outdated. It was memory. It was grief and pride stitched into metal. "My brother and I built this before the company took off," he said. "It still works, but the shutter gear is loose." Sarah examined it with careful hands, as if touching something sacred. Lucas and Chloe stood nearby, watching in a silence that wasn't awkward anymore. It was reverent. "This isn't just a camera," Lucas murmured. "It's history." Robert nodded. "It's the last thing I have of him." Chloe's throat tightened. The story clicked into place, and the hidden pain, the years of isolation, the quiet dignity that made sense only now. He hadn't been a struggling stranger. He had been a man trying to preserve the last piece of someone he loved. Sarah found the replacement part, but her voice trembled as she spoke. "Mr. Hale, you shouldn't have to pay for this. Not today. Not ever." He looked at her gently. "Please, let me pay. I don't want charity, only respect." Her eyes softened. "Then I'll honor that." As she repaired the camera under his watch, something unexpected happened. Customers started gathering nearby, drawn by curiosity. They saw the elderly man, the employees changed expressions, the quiet reverence. One customer whispered, "Who is he?" Another recognized the name Hale from an old documentary about the brand's early days. Suddenly, the room wasn't just a store anymore. It was a moment suspended in time, a man reclaiming a piece of himself, and a group of people learning what dignity truly meant. When Sarah finished the repair and handed the camera back, Robert's fingers brushed the metal gently. His eyes glistened in a way he didn't hide. "Thank you," he said. But the moment wasn't over. Not yet. Sarah cleared her throat. "Mr. Hale, there's something you should see." She reached under the counter and lifted a large poster frame, a timeline of Hale Electronics history. The founder's photos were printed near the top. One was his brother. The second photo was labeled "Missing Partner." Name unconfirmed. Chloe whispered, "That was you, wasn't it?" Robert lowered his head. "Yes." Sarah held the frame carefully, as if she were holding the years he'd lost. "We want to fix that." The old man blinked, surprised, shaken, and unprepared for the kindness he had just been offered. Sarah asked him to follow her to the back office. The employees gathered behind them, their steps quiet, almost apologetic. The office was small but warm, lined with photos of the store's opening day and awards earned over the years. But none of that mattered compared to the single empty space on the founder's wall, a blank frame collecting dust. Sarah wiped it with her sleeve, took a deep breath and turned to Robert. "If you allow it, we want your photo here." Robert stared at the empty space for a long moment. His hand trembled slightly as he reached out and touched the frame. Memories surged, long nights in a garage, the smell of soldering metal, arguments with his brother that always ended in laughter, the day everything collapsed in a single phone call, the grief that drove him into silence. "I haven't felt like a part of this company in 40 years, he murmured. Lucas stepped closer. "You built it, you deserve to be remembered." Chloe added, quieter this time, "And we owe you an apology, all of us." Their sincerity pulled at something deep inside him. He had lived with guilt, loneliness, and regret for so long that kindness felt foreign, almost frightening. Sarah reached for her phone. "Let us take your picture, for the wall." He didn't smile. But the look in his eyes was enough, a quiet acceptance, a fragile step toward healing. The flash went off softly. Sarah printed the photo immediately, sliding it into the empty frame. When she hung it on the wall, the room seemed to shift, as if the past had finally been acknowledged and the missing piece restored. Robert exhaled shakily, his voice catching. "My brother would have liked this." That's when Sarah noticed the faint trembling in his hands, the kind that came not from age, but from a lifetime of holding too much alone. She placed her hand gently on his arm. "You're not invisible anymore," she whispered. But before the moment could settle fully, the store phone rang. Lucas answered, and his expression changed instantly. "Sarah, it's corporate." The room tensed. They know who he is." On speaker, the corporate director's voice boomed through the small room. "Is it true? Is Robert Hale in your store right now?" Sarah exchanged a glance with him. "Yes, sir. He's here." A pause. Long, heavy. "Put him on, please." Sarah handed him the phone with trembling fingers. Robert held it gently, as if afraid it might shatter. "This is Robert Hale," he said softly. The director's tone changed instantly, from formal to reverent. "Mr. Hale, it's an honor. We've been searching for information about you for decades. The company wouldn't exist without your early work." Robert swallowed. His voice was barely audible. "I'm no one important. I just helped my brother." "Sir," the director insisted, "your contributions were foundational. We would like to reinstate you as an honorary partner and place your story in our official archives." Sarah's eyes filled with emotion. The director continued, "If you're willing, I'd like to send a team to your home to interview you." Robert interrupted gently. "My home isn't much. I don't want interviews or attention. I just wanted a part for my camera." The room fell silent. He continued, voice cracking, "I don't need a title. I just need to know that my brother's work is still honored and that the company hasn't forgotten the values we built it on." Sarah stepped closer. "We won't forget again." Lucas nodded. "We'll make sure of it." Chloe wiped her cheek discreetly. "You deserve peace, not noise." Robert closed his eyes for a moment, letting the words sink in. Then he handed the phone back. "Just treat people kindly," he whispered. "That's all I ask." When he walked out of the office, every employee in the store stood quietly, not in fear, not in pity, but in respect. The kind of respect he had been denied for years. As he approached the door, Sarah called after him softly, "Mr. Hale, will you come back?" He turned. The winter light behind him framed his silhouette gently. "Maybe," he said. "This place holds a lot of memories, and maybe it's time I make new ones." He stepped into the cold afternoon, the repaired camera warm in his hands, a piece of the past restored, just like him. The door closed behind him, but something stayed open, in all of them. Years later, the photo of Robert Hale still hung on the wall of that small electronics store in New York, polished, framed, and respected. Customers often asked about the quiet man in the picture, and the employees would tell the story not with shame, but with gratitude. A reminder of why dignity matters, why listening matters, why every stranger might carry a life-changing story we know nothing about. Robert visited sometimes, always soft-spoken, always carrying the camera he and his brother built long ago. But now, he never walked in unseen. He was welcomed, not for his legacy, but for the man he had rebuilt himself into. Sarah kept the first photo they took of him in her desk drawer, a symbol of the day she learned that forgiveness isn't just something we give. It's something that transforms everyone involved. And every time Robert looked at the camera in his hands, He felt something he thought he lost forever. Peace. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this heart-touching story. Tell us in the comments which moment touched you the most. Subscribe and turn on the bell to receive more stories that inspire and transform. Leave a like if you believe in the invisible strength of kindness, dignity, and family. And thank you for being part of this community that believes in stories with soul.